Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Late Bloomer actor, aka David John Clark. You know that, of course, and we're coming back for another wonderful episode of the Late Bloomer actor podcast. Please excuse if I come across tired. I've got a bit of jet lag. I just got back from the States today, or yesterday. Today. There you go. See, that's a jet lag coming in. But we have in the room today a friend and fellow actor that I've met in the audition technique that we talked about last month, and we'll go in that into a minute, Mr. Greg Poppleton. His movie debut was in Moulin Rouge in 2001 in scenes with Nicole Kidman that were used in the trailer. His TV credits include Caper Crew from ABC, Mother and Son Season 2 ABC, Barron's ABC, obviously the ABC love him, and many more. On stage, Greg played Joe Keller in Arthur Miller's All My Sons, the Greek philosopher, Subturus and John Stark, that's Scott Joplin's manager, in a one-man show. One-man show, that is awesome, with Ragtime Orchestra. He is Australia's only authentic 1920s and 30s singer and is an award-winning national jazz broadcaster with over 40 years on the air. That's jazz music. We're going to talk a lot about that, and I'm really excited to talk about that. Greg grew up in Sydney, which is where he is now. He was an engineering consultant and has an honours degree in chemical engineering from the University of New South Wales, Sydney. He's also a graduate diploma in communications from the University of Technology, Sydney, which is a big segue into why he's on the show as a fellow late bloomer. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David, for having me on your podcast. And let's see whether that graduate diploma in communications is actually effective.
I had Trudy Yeager on the show last month, and I wanted to chat.
Yes, I saw it. It was good.
Yeah, I wanted to bring on a couple of fellow taters. Now, we explained the term tater to everyone last month, but for those that didn't listen to it, tater is a member of the audition technique. Greg Apps, casting director out of Sydney, has the audition technique, which is where our paths have crossed. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's right. The audition technique that Greg Apps runs is an excellent online program for actors who want to develop their self-tape skills and also their character creating skills with input from a casting director who's been in the business for decades. He knows what he's looking for, so you're really getting hot tips. Everything that he says is gold, but they're not acting lessons.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because we can all act. Everyone can act. It's about bringing it to the screen, and that's what we're going to talk about a lot here today. But before we go into it, and I've did given you a little bit of intro, but can you just tell our viewers and everyone watching or listening how you got into the world of acting, and do you consider yourself a late bloomer?
Well, I've never considered myself a late bloomer. Like, I've never actually used that term, but I've certainly been aware that I didn't start acting until I was 35. That's when I got my first job. How did I start acting? I have this theory, and I've applied it to my own kids, and it's been successful. So there's one data point in my theory. And I reflect back on my own life to develop this theory, because I've been very blessed in that I'm one of those people that actually has very clear memories of earliest childhood. So I'm talking from the age of 8 months to 4 years.
Wow.
Most people don't have memory of that.
I don't have memory from yesterday.
Sorry?
I don't have memory from yesterday.
Oh, right.
But that's old age, I suppose. So,
so I understand how the world looks to children of that age and how the brain works. And one of the things that I have concluded, whether it's true or not, but I think it's applicable, is that whatever a child does in earliest childhood, and I think that's before the age of 3 years old, is really what they should be doing as an adult. So in earliest childhood, I was making up stories, I was performing, I was imagining that I was on TV, I was imagining that I was on the radio, I was watching my sister do ballet. I wanted to perform.
love it.
Not that I thought that I was going to be famous or anything like that. It was just innate. However, I grew up in a family where there was, apart from my sister doing ballet, but she did that until about 16, and then she was hauled off to secretarial school and then to become a bus conductor.
Oh.
I was brought up in a family that had otherwise no connection to the arts whatsoever. and was very much of the view that you're either a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a failure. And my father basically wanted me to become an engineer. And I thought, well, I have no way of knowing how to get into acting or into the arts or anything like that, even though I read, I wrote, I drew. So I thought, the creative outlet is engineering, and chemical engineering excited me. And, in many ways it still does. In fact, just the other day, I was looking at the School of Chemical Engineering LinkedIn page for the University of New South Wales. And there was a story about a recent graduate, and I thought, oh, wow, that is absolutely fantastic. She's doing all this research. This is really, really exciting. And then I caught myself and thought, nah, I've been there.
Too late to go back.
And it wasn't for me because unfortunately in Australia with our small manufacturing industry and mostly dominated by transnationals, most engineers are essentially glorified clerks or managers. So there's really not much creativity there for you to do. I fortunately grew up at a time where community radio was burgeoning. And there was a network of radio stations around Australia called Radio for the Print Handicapped. You've got one in Adelaide, and it just started in Sydney, 2RPH. And I happened to be fiddling around with the radio because I listened to a lot of radio as a teenager, a lot of shortwave radio, which is how you connected with the world before the internet. And I heard the close down for 2RPH. And before the close down, there was a bit of reading from newspapers, which is what they did. And I thought, that's interesting. And then I heard the announcer closing down, and he was terrible. But the closing announcement was, if you want to be a volunteer, get in touch. So I went to the phone and I rang, as you did in those days. And 6 months later, I got an audition that was run by a very smarmy actor. And I failed the audition because I hadn't read out loud in years and years and years. So I couldn't tell a story reading from a newspaper, which is a hard thing to do because newspapers are written to be read in the head, not to be read aloud. But anyhow, I didn't want to be a reader. What I wanted to be was behind the panel. I wanted to be the announcer. I wanted to be the guy that said, you've just heard a rebroadcast. That's all I wanted to do. And that's what I got. So I learnt the technical skills. And because 2RPH had just started up, I ended up, combined with working as an engineer in the day, I calculated I was doing 23 hours a week of volunteering, writing scripts, performing characters, doing all kinds of shows, plus panel operating, and also doing their close down. So I was their close down voice because at that time the station only operated a few hours a day. And then that led me to another community radio station called 2SER, where I still am, where I do broadcast The Phantom Dancer, which is now networked around Australia. Your non-stop mix of swing and jazz from live 1920s to 1960s radio and TV. And I started writing scripts there. I had a quiz program called Word Sports, and I ran that for 2 years. And I also ran that at a local pub called the Harold Park Hotel, which was a literary hub at the time. It was one of the 3 main literary venues around the world. If you were a big writer, you read at the Harold Park Hotel, and I was the MC. And every 3 months, I'd have a big Word Sports Cup where there would be a team from the ABC, a team from a few of the local papers. I think there was a team from Triple J, and they would compete against each other on stage. I was the host for Word Sports. And then from that, I started doing the Poetry Cup for the Sydney Writers Festival. And so I was building up a body of work. Plus, I was also the first English language broadcaster on SBS radio, where by that time I was working professionally. So community radio had allowed me to leave engineering, which is what I wanted to do by the age of 28 after I'd become a consultant. And I was working at SBS as a panel operator. And the first SBS voice in Darwin. Hey, there's a niche.
Nice.
With that body of work, working at 2RPH and teaching someone panel operating one night, this person who was from the ABC said, there's a cattle call for a children's show, and I think you should go for it. And I'd never been to an audition before. So I went to this cattle call. There were hundreds of people there for a children's show.
Wow.
I was there for 2 hours or so, 3 hours maybe, just for the first round. Everybody had, I think it was about a minute in front of the camera where they had 2 tasks to do. That was the first thing. Well, I was eliminated in the first round, but I got and heard it. I heard everybody. And it was fascinating, for a children's show, there were 6 people out of those hundreds who said how much they hated kids.
At an audition. Jeez.
At an audition. But the guy who got it, I remember his audition clearly because he was entirely different from everybody else. He was not only personable, but he was also obviously someone who didn't think inside the square.
Nice.
I won't say what it is that he said, but he did say something that had to do with a performance that he'd recently been at in Western Australia, or performed at. And the comment that he made about that performance was so outside the political niche at that time, but delivered with such natural empathy that even I, in the back rows, was thinking, oh yeah, this guy is interesting. And this guy ended up getting the gig. And the gig was the afternoon show on the ABC, and the person was that wonderful broadcaster, the late James Valentine. But
only recently, we only just recently lost him, didn't we?
That's right, we did, which was very sad. He's a really wonderful person and a great loss. Definitely. And also an excellent jazz tenor saxophonist, and it was good that he continued with jazz after his rock career and while he was still a broadcaster. After that, I was pointed to a newspaper ad for another cattle call. And this was in the early 90s, about the time, let's see, the World Wide Web had been established. The internet's been around for decades and decades, but the World Wide Web, where we can do what we're doing now, really only started around 1992 when HTML was written. And very few people were on the World Wide Web, but some of the big broadcasters were starting to think, there's some opportunities here. And a fellow called Simon Townsend, who did a very important children's show called Wonder World, was auditioning for an interactive kids show on Channel 7. And I went for that. There were also hundreds of people there, but this time I got into the final round. I got into the final 20, and for the males, that's as far as they went because they ran out of time. But I got a call from the producer, and she said, we like what you did. You got a good face for radio. Get an agent. And I was so naive. I was so naive that I still remember waiting for a booking at SBS Radio. So in the studio, waiting for the next broadcaster to come to record them, picking up the phone and talking to, ringing one of the top agents at the time, Hilary Lindstead. It was very nice. I just found her out of the yellow pages. I wouldn't have known who she was from Adam, and said, this is what the producer said, I'm looking for an agent. And she very kindly, very patiently told me how to go about it. And eventually I did find an agent. And unusually, I found an agent before I had even learnt to act. And that was the age at 34, and I booked my first job a year later. I really needed to learn how to act. So I did do some acting classes at the suggestion of a casting consultant, because you would go as a recently hired client of a casting agent. You would be sent off for go-sees. Go-sees were where you personally would meet the casting consultant, and the casting consultant would give you a script. In fact, I met Greg Apps that way, would give you a script and you would go through the script. Some casting consultants would just look at you and say, yep, you're good. That was one casting consultant. She ended up giving me lots of work. But this particular casting consultant said to me, you have an interesting face. You have a depth in your eyes. I like what you did, but you need to learn to act and you need to do yoga.
Yoga?
Yeah. For movement. For movement.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So I ended up taking the acting lessons, which really helped. And I did a few weeks of yoga, but I found it made me really tense and clenching my jaw. So I stopped that. So there we go. There's about a quarter of your podcast done.
I love it.
There's the story. But the essential essence of that story is, and I say this to medical students, I say this to legal students who have gone through their degrees and they've said, I don't know if this is for me. My advice is complete your degree, because that's how you learn a certain way of thinking. For chemical engineers, we learn how to work things out from first principles. It's very, very logical and very, very handy. Learn those techniques and then reflect on what is it that you really wanted to do in earliest childhood. What's your natural ability? And to lead a happy life, you've got to do what you are good at, because then you will want to grow, you will enjoy it, and you will be useful to yourself and to the people around you.
I love that. Now, Greg, you haven't touched on it yet. And I'm going to go into a question that sort of brings both your jazz background and acting together. But I've been reading online, and if in answering this question, you can give us a bit of an intro into your jazz side of things and how and why you do that. But in both your music and your acting, you've stated that you lean heavily into raw simplicity. So for your 1920s jazz albums, you use minimal editing and a single vintage microphone. And for your self-tapes, you've mentioned keeping it simple by using just a phone, a microphone stand, and natural light. So a lot of late bloomers often think they need thousands of dollars in studio equipment or high-tech lighting setups to be taken seriously by casting directors. What did your training with Greg Apps and any other training teach you about why the industry values this raw, this imaginative storytelling over expensive technical production?
Because the art that we are in, or the art that we are creating, it's all about storytelling. That's the simple answer. It kind of depends on the room that you have for self-taping when we get technical. If you have sufficient natural light, like I've got a big window over this side and I put on the overhead light here, you're fine. I don't have a screen. That yellow wall is fine. This is postage stamp size. This is where I do the self-tape. There are some limitations to it, but I've gotten work here. I have to take this bookcase down. There's a lot of shifting around for me before I can actually do a self-tape. I personally, because I've read for about 1,300 or so people now over the past few years, mostly actors in America, and I find no difference between those who have impressive technical setups and those who just have a non-distracting background with sufficient light. In fact, my prejudice is that sometimes people with very big setups are less comfortable in front of camera than those people that can just quickly throw something up, because they're so involved in the technical aspects, where really the only technical aspects I think that they need to be involved in is storytelling and the frame. And
Definitely.
that's it. The other thing I'll just very, very quickly say, and it's easier said than done, but it's certainly a mantra that I have. It's not about how good your setup is, but you don't want your setup to be distracting, so long as it works for you. Branding is ridiculous. It's an absolute nonsense. It's all about the quality of the work. If you present self-tapes that help the casting consultant, that make the casting consultant look good by telling the story, and this also supports your agent, if you do that, if you're on set and you're a nice person and you're efficient, there's no attitude. When you're told to stand on your mark, you stand on your mark. There's no wandering off, all that sort of thing. If you make life easy for the crew who are lugging heavy equipment and working long days, often in under stressful conditions as far as heat and cold and wind and rain. If you make life easy for everybody, then I think you increase the likelihood of being asked to create another character, to populate a movie or a TV series, because people want to work with you.
That's perfectly said. It's almost like I'm talking to Greg Apps himself. I can see where that has affected your decisions and your processes for acting. So, do you say that with your acting now that everything that you've got professionally and where you're going, and I know your journey is really moving forward, is as a background of Greg Apps, or is it encompasses so much more as well? How much do you lean on what you've taken away from Greg Apps and the audition technique? Because I know myself, I call Greg a mentor because he started on my journey. I think it was one of the first rooms I walked into when I started acting, and I've just moved on from there and just done everything. And I know you probably followed the similar journey. What do you think of that?
Well, David, I say that you're very fortunate that Greg Apps appeared in your journey very, very early on, because it means then that you learned good techniques, and it means that you didn't have to unlearn bad habits. Greg Apps and the audition technique, his self-taping skill and creating compelling characters has been fundamental. It's made a big change in, I suppose, my score rate. And look, let's be honest, I am a jobbing actor, right? I'm not somebody who is the star in TV series. I'm not the 50-worder or the background guy. I'm the guy that comes on as a character and does a couple of scenes in a TV series. I'd be the 50-word in a movie. And I do TV commercials, and also
Nice.
I do the improvisational, paid work. So I'm very fortunate in that I'm able to do sufficient acting that I'm able to make a living.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's so I'm very, very fortunate.
Mm.
And Greg Apps and his insights have just very much helped in freeing my imagination. Because not only does he describe, gives feedback as far as technical issues with regards to self-taping and framing and options about what you can do and moving in the frame and so forth, but these things are freeing, and they're freeing in two ways. Number one, we actually know from a very, very successful casting consultant what it is that they're looking for. So actors do tend to talk amongst themselves and create rules. Well, a lot of these rules are really a nonsense.
I love it.
And the other thing is that now that you know that you can move in the frame, but that the movement has to tell the story.
Definitely.
It's not movement for just because I feel like it. It has to tell the story.
Mm.
So now that you know that you can do that, now that you know that you can look in any direction, that you don't have to freeze, that, creating a character is not about putting on a funny moustache or all that sort of thing, but just sufficient to suggest whatever it is, the social class, the age of the character, the location of the character, all these things. I've found that, well, I think the results are that I have been getting more work, but most importantly for me, because you got to eat. Most
Of course.
importantly for me is that I'm actually enjoying what I'm doing. I don't find it a chore. I find it's almost become like play, even though there is a certain amount of anxiety and tension because you think, oh, I really like to do this job, and that horrible thing which artists shouldn't be thinking, and that is, I hope they like it. See, that's death.
Definitely.
You've got to do it for, hey, this is what I think the character is. You don't, in a humble way, not in an arrogant way. This is who the character is. I present this. Take it or leave it, but I've done my best. I've done my best for you, right? So you know that I have prepared. You know that I have studied the script. I've studied the character. I've thought about the background. I've thought about what it is that I want, all those technical things. I haven't just slovenly put something together. And I've presented something that if it passes muster, then you can pass on to a producer and it makes you look good. I said, thank you, casting director, for showing me this tape. This actor's interesting. We'll call him back.
I love it. Now, when you're on stage, as in your role as a jazz singer and that, I did do some reading that you are yourself when you're on stage and you're presenting. And then your acting is playing characters and you don't like the two to mold. Now, Greg Apps once told me, he says, David, I don't want to see David Clarke, the actor. I want to see David Clarke, but playing the character. How do you mold, or if you do or you don't, your jazz singing approach, which is artistic and it's presenting and it's staging? And I did read that you were there. It's a very can be an improvisation thing too, that back in the 1920s, they used to change it according to what the audience wants. So do you see that crossing over into your acting world, or is it two different artistic approaches?
It's two different artistic approaches. Performing on stage as a singer with a band is performance. Performance on stage as an actor or in front of a camera is death. You don't perform in front of a camera, I believe. You don't perform in the theatre on stage. You tell the story, you live the character, you stay in the moment.
Love it.
Performing is an entirely different kettle of fish. Performing is a relationship between you and the audience, which is heightened. Now, of course, in theatre, there is a relationship between you and the audience. The audience has to be drawn in. On stage, of course, the audience has to be drawn in, but you have to create a persona. You have to create an energy, not loud. It depends on the genre of music, but actually being quiet is very, very successful, draws people in. But you have to do that to create a show. And look, jazz shows are one of these drop-in kind of affairs. A jazz gig often goes for 3 hours. That's long, you know? So, people drop in, drop out. People might be there for the whole 3 hours. It all depends. So you've got to be, as American jazz people say, you've got to be on. So I suppose in your question, there's a bit of a trick of language there in how I describe myself as being myself on stage
Uh-huh.
when I sing the swing and jazz of the 1920s and 1930s. I avoid saying that I play a character because I deliberately don't play a character. But what I do is I bring out a part of myself that loves, that music.
Uh-huh.
And the thing that is unique about the way that I sing, which is why I call myself Australia's only authentic 1920s and 30s swing and jazz singer, is that, and this is related to acting, it's the music that I've been listening to since earliest childhood. When I first
Nice.
saw Louis Armstrong on TV at the age of 3, I can remember it. And that's when I
Mm.
started listening to this music. And so I've absorbed it over the
Mm.
years. When I sing it, I can't help sounding like a 20s and 30s singer. As many people over the decades have said, usually these people come to see whether I use some kind of filter on the mic or something like that. But no, I,
Wow.
s- I sing in an
Mm.
Australian accent. I sing in the style authentically. And that in itself creates a character.
Fair enough.
So here's a question for you. And that is, or a question for me also to think about. And that is then, well, is that then creating a character? Well, I think it is.
Yeah.
Because in my view, if a character has a purpose, if a character has a heart, if a character has a certain way of thinking, if a character has certain principles, if a character has certain ways of singing, certain ways of talking, certain ways of moving, certain ways of addressing the audience, certain ways of subverting the politeness and niceness that might be expected in old jazz and revealing how it actually was in the 20s and 30s, not through lecturing, but just saying, hey, people had fun on stage. They weren't all stiff black and white photo
Mm.
types. Then I think I've created a character. Unfortunately, for advertising purposes, I have to keep things simple. That's a very convoluted answer, but anyway,
No,
make
no,
of it as you will.
I like that. And, it's interesting. We all bring different things into our acting.
Mm,
And we have to draw on different experiences. And as my podcast, from my point of view, being a late bloomer actor, and I've spoken to a lot of late bloomer actors, and we've done some comparisons between young actors who are studying at university now about what you can bring to this role or a role. Now, it really would be really hard, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, for a 23-year-old actor straight out of university to bring the depth of emotion to a character that is suffering love or death, or so those strong emotions that older actors like ourselves, regardless of a background, regardless of whether you're a 1920s jazz singer or an engineer, or in my case, a 34-year veteran in the public service, we have different experiences. We've gone through things. Do you see that difference between young and older actors? Obviously, in the audition technique, we have fellow younger actors on there. Do you feel that would be true? Or as Greg puts it, he can mold us all into that ability to deliver the character.
that's a very, very good question. I
Thank you.
see it as that I see it that we come from different starting points. The advantage of starting young, particularly if you start really young, say if you
Mm,
start from the age of 6, is that the mind is still plastic. You still have that ability to imagine and play, and you don't have the inhibitions to play what you perceive to be a grandmother, or to
true.
play what you might perceive to be a coal miner, or play what you perceive to be a doctor. You would just do it.
Mm,
And you would do it through imagination and observation, which is what acting should be. Those people who start very young, if they manage to survive the training and the auditioning and the process of acting through their teenage years, I think by and large become very good natural actors if they wish to
mm,
pursue it. And certainly those people who then go on to formal training, well, then they're in an even better position because they are learning the craft.
mm,
And like any profession, right, Well, it's a profession, right?
Mm,
And it's a profession that you have to learn. Acting, there's a certain natural ability, but there are, like in sport, like in any skill that uses the mind and the body, there must be training. And training to improve. So, and this refers to what Greg was saying about anyone can play anything. If I understood what you were saying, or I'm paraphrasing that,
mhm,
broadening your range. Craft broadens your range. Now, for people like us who started acting later in life, we do bring a lot of experience. Absolutely. Experience that younger people don't have.
mm.
And that makes it easier for us to play things like fathers and managers and lawyers and judges and so forth. But it doesn't mean that younger people can't do that.
Of course.
But what older people really need is craft
Mm,
and good acting lessons. And good acting lessons are very, very thin on the ground. So I do think that I think the younger people have the advantage.
it's
Absolutely, I do.
back in
But
my day.
back in my day, but look, it all does come down to range and the
Mm,
quality of work. And for both, it also comes down to practicing every day. Simple as that. Got to practice every day. And the technology now allows us to do that.
mm,
So you can get a monologue and you can study it every day and you can put it in front of your computer. You can film yourself, on QuickTime, or you can use your camera and you can look at it back critically.
definitely.
Yeah. Or,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah, and
sorry.
I was just going to say there because I know he hasn't done it for a little while, but Greg's used to have the weekly character challenges, which you did regularly, and you played anything from political prisoner to abstract roles. A lot of late bloomers only act when they get an official audition, which leaves them feeling rusty. And it's
Mm,
probably not just at late bloomers; a lot of actors do that.
yeah.
How important do you think it has been for your growth to use these 60-second micro challenges as a safe gym to an experiment, fail, and to keep your acting muscles warm between these professional gigs? That's what you were sort of leaning into there about doing something regular, not as a training purpose, but doing the do, so to speak.
That's right. Well, see,
Mm,
they're good because they keep you accountable. It means that you avoid self-indulgence. It means that if there's any habits creeping in, bad habits creeping in, that they can be spotted by a professional eye and you can be reminded. Because one of the unusual things about the arts is we can rattle off all the things that you're supposed to do. But when it actually comes to doing it, it's naturally human to do whatever is easiest.
mm,
So therefore, we may find that we may not do all the things that we know that we are supposed to do because at that particular time, oh, it kind of feels good to do this. So it is good to have that professional feedback. However, that's not enough. I think if you actually have a good acting teacher, you are lucky. One of the red flags for an acting school, if you're in acting class and you go up and do a scene, and at the end of the scene, everybody goes, leave it. That's a joke,
yeah.
right? Acting classes is not about therapy. It's not about ego stroking. It's like a gym.
Mm,
Acting classes, you're there to fail. That's what you're there to do because you can only learn by failing. Likewise, ideally, like I do this with singing, I do my scales every day, and I do some aspect of acting every day. Every day. Could be learning a monologue, could be analyzing a scene, could be doing check-off exercises, movement, right? Any of
mm,
these things, because you never know when the phone is going to call. And we're in such a small industry, David.
mm.
Yeah, it's not like that we'd be doing, films and TV and on set doing ads and doing like in America where they may be doing 5 or 6 auditions a week. We don't have that here,
No.
right? So you've got to be ready. And as Michael Caine said, he said somebody had questioned him, why did you do so many bad films? Words to that effect. And he said, well, while I'm doing those films, I'm developing my skills. Because on the last good film I was on, when I see those actors again come back on set, they are so rusty. So you don't want to be rusty. You've got to be ready when opportunity arrives.
And I suppose in your singing career, you would see that as well. If you took, would there be a period of time where you would know that, I've lost a little bit there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You've got to practice every day.
It's a bit like the American accent, isn't it? You might have it down pat, but if you're not practicing that over and over, you take 6 weeks off and then you get that call for an audition. It's almost like you're starting again, isn't it?
That's a very, very good point, because my American accent is terrible.
I'm glad there's another person that could join the club with me. I like to say I'm tone deaf. I just can't get it. But again, it comes down to, I don't think I spend enough time doing it.
Exactly. Look, I haven't spent enough time doing it. I did do months and months and months of online training. I did for all my sons go to a professional accent coach and learn an accent, but I stupidly did not keep that accent up. So that really goes back to how you have to train every day. And with regards to language, whether it's an accent or learning a new accent or learning a new language, you have to speak out loud. There's no other way of learning it.
We can't learn to sing in your head, can you?
No. And likewise, you can't learn to act in your head either. You can read as many books as you like, and that's good. Acting books, that's fine, but it's passive. You have to put it on your feet. Now, the other thing, just harking back to something that a point in your last question, and that is with regards to American accent. Yeah, it's all very well listening to some tape and repeating it, but without accountability, without somebody checking and going, that's not right, well, you're learning bad habits. And this is one of the problems about practicing at home, whether it's singing or whether it's acting. You can still develop bad habits.
Of course.
So you still need, I believe, to practice plus go to acting classes, reputable, good acting classes, where you can put what you've practiced on your feet and get feedback. Because what you could end up doing if you just practice in your bedroom on your own is basically learn bad habits.
Yeah.
Because we will go down the common human pathway, and that is to take the easiest path.
Yeah. Now, do you think, obviously we've got time constraints and money constraints and everything like that, with your acting classes and then audition training that like Greg gets, which one do you think we should be doing, both of them all the time, or just acting classes to build that base up and then come back to it every now and then? Or do you think you should always be doing acting training and then always be doing audition training, whether that's your own self-tapes and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think you should always be doing acting training and you should always be doing audition training. And as you say, it comes down to monetary constraints, but in an ideal world, you should at least be doing one acting class a week. And when you can, you should be putting yourself up online for an audition challenge. And you certainly should be becoming a member of the audition technique and listen to Greg's monthly podcast. Like his last one about the 8 points about auditions is fantastic.
Definitely. I'd actually jumped in online with that. I was in the States, but I was traveling, so I got maybe 10 minutes of it. But it is about being part of that community, and Greg Apps it is that community. Yes, you've got to pay for it. You've got to pay for everything. People don't do these things for free. COVID's gone. No one's doing anything for free anymore. But it's about finding it. And it's not necessary. You don't have to join Greg Apps community. There are plenty of other similar techniques. Stage milk is one that I've done. That same environment where you get that face-to-face feedback. I'm with Castability over in the States now, where you can submit self-tapes and there's casting directors actually rating them in like an audition simulator sense.
Yeah.
So you're actually getting feedback back, but it's about putting something to tape, and not only you're seeing your response, but you're getting someone else's feedback. Because I don't know if you probably agree with me, but we saw it along, is it The Voice or one of the Voice or Australian Idol, one of those ones where they do those open casting calls and people just off the street. They haven't been auditioned yet. They just let anyone come on and they think they can sing. Those ones that come up, they're just, oh my God, you're embarrassing. So, but a lot of them actually think they can sing because their mum and their grandma and their brothers and sisters have said, you're a great singer. And that's sad. And I worry about that sometimes with my acting, going, oh, is everyone just telling me that I'm okay or I'm good or do I suck? And that's why it's good to have that feedback from professionals like Greg or Stage Milk or Castability, whatever your method is. So I love that you've really focused on that. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a blues singer that I first did singing lessons with called Kate Dunbar. And she said, never believe the hype, never believe the publicity. And that's true. And with regards to those people that, believe they have good voices and they go and audition for all these TV programs, well, there's not much difference between them and us, or there's not much difference between them and me anyhow, which is why I feel it's so important to continue training, to continue going to that gym, because we can delude ourselves, I know that's a harsh word, and think that we've reached a certain peak, a certain level, because in other acting classes, people have gone, and the acting teacher who wants your money for the next course has gone, oh, that's really good, Greg. That's really, really good. But going to Greg Apps and Stage Milk and Castability, which I've done, is very, very instructive. Greg Apps, because he gives specific feedback, I think is much more useful. Castability ranks your audition, but the ranking is honest, because with regards to being deluded, I have sent in self-tapes to Castability and thought, oh, this is really good. I prepared, I put a lot of work into it, right? And I sent it off, thought this is really good. And I've come back with the lowest score. Interesting. But I keep those on file, and I usually look at them once about 6 months later, because time is the best editor.
Definitely.
And I can see why it was a 1.
Oh, well, that's
I get a
nice.
5 for, which is the highest. When I look back 6 months later, I go, oh, yeah, I can see that. There's a certain quality, and the quality is that the performance draws you in.
Definitely. And the good thing with the Castability as well is that you can actually see the person that won, so you get to compare what the person, and we're not saying there's big differences. They might have won by 1 or 2 points, which is what auditions are. We lose most of our auditions not because we suck, but because they needed someone with blue eyes, or you might be slightly too tall to go with the wife that they're putting you with on the scene. It's not about your acting. So that's also a good aspect to see that side of things. I love that.
But the other thing, very, very quickly, with that kind of self-assessment and accountability through, say, Castability, is that what you learn is how important it is not to show the technique.
Definitely.
And that's hard, right? And not to show your preparation, not to show all the work that you've done, right? Just to throw it all away and be in the moment opposite your reader.
Awesome. And as we wind up, I wanted to quickly ask you in relation to things like, some of the technical aspects of learning lines. As a singer, you've got to learn lines. I mean, mostly with music, once you know your songs, you know your songs. But is there a similar techniques into learning a new song to learning a script, or is it completely different? Because one is just learning songs have got emotion and character and storylines, same as a script.
Yeah, see, songs have a constraint in them because, well, with jazz and swing anyway,
Uh,
you have a melody in which you are contained. So you've just got to be careful or aware, but it's the same with acting, not to let the emotion overblow the story, destroy the melody. Because
uh,
scripts have a music in them too. And if you go about forcing the emotion, if you go about stressing words and huffing and puffing and doing those Hollywood sighs, well, you destroy the music.
mm,
There is
nice.
there is a similarity with regards to learning lines. I personally find it really hard. It's a
Yeah.
hard grind, and I just have to go over and go over and go over. I use my imagination to see images.
Uh-huh.
That helps. I understand the story. I do things like paraphrasing the story, but often I find getting that script down. It doesn't have to be word perfect, but it's got to be for an audition,
Mm.
but you don't want to lose the meaning. I think it's preferable to be word perfect. I mean, if
I
you make
agree.
a mistake in the audition, that's fine, but you must respect the writer. The writer has put all those words and punctuation in for a reason.
And we don't change it. We don't change the words of a song. No one does. We all learn a song wrote, don't we? So why would you even consider doing that for script?
That's right. But if
Mm,
for some reason you forget some of the
mm,
words, if you know the story well enough,
mm.
you can make them up and the words will fit in the story. But you've always got to respect the writer. So yeah, I find for me it's a case of repetition, repetition, repetition. I have tried other tricks which are
Yeah.
based on neurology, such as how to put it simply, increasing the amount of endorphin in the brain after a bout of learning so that the neural
Mm.
pathways in that learning process become fixed. So you might do
Interesting.
that
Mm,
by doing, push-ups or some quick high intensity exercise.
uh,
The human body is conditioned for this sort of thing. If you want to teach somebody something in an oral society, then what would usually happen is some kind of initiation, and that pain would cement the idea.
mm. I think it's about finding a way to, once you start to learn those lines, about delivering them while you're doing something else as well. That's
Mm,
how to get that learning out and to make it natural. Jeff Seymour, aka the real life actor, he
mm,
has a technique where he says once you've got the lines pretty much in your head, then you've got to go and do your scene or do your monologue while getting a shuffled pair of cards and putting them all in order. So you're
mm.
sitting there putting them in order, but delivering your lines. And it's the same thing as if you're going for a run or weightlifting, trying to deliver that. Another technique is we all get into a routine of delivering our lines at one pace, the way I'm talking now. But if I want to talk really fast, I can talk really fast and it comes out natural. But are you able to do that with your script? Because you might get on set and they all of a sudden say, we've changed the tone of this whole story. You are now angry, or we want this fast pace. So you now need to be able to switch on a dime with that as well. They're all little techniques as well.
And they are all
Mm,
good techniques,
mm,
but I think there is a trap to them
mm-hmm.
in how they're thought about. I think they're good for tests, and I
Okay.
certainly think tests as in to discover how well you know the dialogue.
Mm.
But I really don't believe that they are a way to learn because they are tricks.
Okay.
For
That makes
great
sense.
actors, say, for example, Alec Guinness, Judi Dench, they have photographic memories.
Yeah.
And the key is that they can access the dialogue so naturally, so quickly, that if you gave them a deck of cards, they would shuffle and be able to rattle off the lines.
Mm.
You sort of see the difference. If you make the
Fair enough.
focus, I believe, I've got to learn the lines while shuffling cards. Well, then you've made it all about the lines. But we're not. I believe dialogue is not about the lines; it's about the ideas.
Mm. So having that broader, overarching understanding of the scene and the character that you're in, then learn the lines and let the lines mold into that understanding. And it should then come out
Mm.
naturally, like me and you were talking now. I love that.
Yeah, because
Mm.
certainly, when I'll practice a monologue, and when I first start learning a monologue, it's pretty constipated.
Yeah.
But
It's a good word for it.
then I
Mm.
might leave it and go on to something else, and then I'm walking along the street and it comes to mind, and I'll go through it and I think, "Oh, that's really natural." And
Mm.
I found new things. "Oh, so that's why they use that word here to describe this here. Oh, I missed that idea." And it comes down then to, see, it's all about ideas.
Mm.
And theatre actors will say this all the time. They'll say, "With every performance, I learned something new." And some great theatre actors have said for some of their most iconic characters, "I never got into it," as in, I never fully understood. I wasn't satisfied. I
Mm.
was searching and finding every night. But again, when it comes to all these tricks to learning lines, sure, fine, they're good, right? But
Mm.
you got to keep in mind they're tricks, they're tests. They're not a means to an end.
Mm. And everything works differently for everyone, and that's why I talked with my son who's, studying at the moment, acting, and it's
Mhm.
about building your toolbox up and people giving you access to these tools and then working out what works for you. Throw out the ones that don't work for you
Yeah,
and having that core amount. This one's gonna work for this, but it won't work for this situation, and knowing what's good for you, isn't it?
developing your craft.
And what's one good thing that's for you might not be good for me, so that makes perfect
Exactly.
sense.
And very
Mm,
briefly on that point,
mm,
I really dislike the battle of the acting gurus. "Oh, I do Meisner technique. Oh, I do practical aesthetics. I do this. I do that."
mm,
To hell with it. It's all a nonsense.
mm,
What you got to do is tell the story. Now, as you say, if a particular technique helps you to tell that story, that's good. But if
yep,
I'm acting opposite some Meisner person, right,
mm,
and they're in their head that it's all about shaping a scene rather than being in the moment, well, it's hard work.
I love that. Yeah, finding your niche, finding your way to deliver. And hey, if
Yeah,
Meisner does it for you, that's fine. But you need to be able to know that you can pull something else out of the toolbox when that doesn't work. Mm,
because it's not about
mm,
you, it's about the other actor. It's
exactly.
about the other
Mm,
character, and it's about the story.
mm. I love that. Thank you very much, Greg. As we wind up, we've just gone over an hour, but I think we've pretty much touched on everything that I wanted to, especially about that craft of acting and having that community that we're involved with, from Greg Apps and the
Yeah.
audition technique to keep your acting journey going forward. So, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you would like to touch on before we wind up?
Yeah, just to add to what you've just said, which I think is really, really good. It's all about recognizing that and this is the term that I believe you created, late bloomers, that
Hmm.
we are late bloomers, but it is never too old to learn. You're never too old to learn,
Mm,
and life is a process of learning. A happy life is where you continually learn. So
mm.
never ever limit yourself because you think, "Oh, I'm becoming too old. My hair's gone grey. I'm going wrinkly. People don't like booking old people." Don't do that. Keep
Mm,
on going because, yeah, if you're someone who's seeking fame, well, by this age, you'd be out of the business.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
But if you're someone who does it for the love of acting, the love of the craft, the love of imagination, the love of storytelling, meeting, wonderful people such as yourself, David, and
Thank you.
and everyone who works in the industry, both in front of and behind the camera, in front of the curtain and behind the curtain, going
Mm,
to wonderful places that you otherwise would never have gone before, both in your imagination and also physically, visiting mansions and castles and whatever else that and huge sound stages where these places are set. Well,
mm.
open yourself up to it.
It's beautiful, and that's what I teach on this podcast, and I say it pretty much every episode. The moment you stop having fun doing this, go and find something else to do.
Exactly.
Mm,
You're no use to yourself or anyone. The moment I stopped having fun being an engineer, it was time to go.
to move on. Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you very much. Now, I have a tradition on the show that I've been doing for a few years now. I like to ask my guests, what is their T-shirt quote? So something that they would like to put on a T-shirt. I've got Top Gun at the moment because I've just come back from San Diego. I was very fortunate to go to the Top Gun Cafe where the Great Balls of Fire scene was filmed. So I've got the wonderful shirt. And if I turn
wonderful.
around,
Yeah.
so I wanted to wear that because I just got back. But what would your T-shirt quote be? It doesn't have to be acting related. It doesn't have to be movie related or your singing related. It has to be something that you'd be willing to put on a shirt that had a message that you wanted to put out there.
Well, Dave, I don't want to sound a bit of a downer, but I don't like any logos on T-shirts. What I mean is I don't like wearing T-shirts with logos. I have no problem with people wearing T-shirts with logos.
Good.
But the reason why my T-shirt will be blank is that I'm not interested in carrying other people's ideas or advertising other people's ideas or businesses, right? I don't want some quote from another person to be the first impression that defines who I am.
Nice. And you know what? That in itself answers the question because that's what it's that T-shirt quote it's not necessarily meaning we're putting on a T-shirt, but it's something that you want to tell people, and you've just done that. And I love it. So thank you very much, Greg. This has been an absolute pleasure. It's great to chat to fellow taters again.
Yes.
If you don't know what it is, look it up. If you haven't joined or checked out the audition technique, we can attest it is an absolutely brilliant process to go through. You learn the basics of technical setup, technical acting, audition technique, as well as enhancing your craft and meeting great people.
It's got me more gigs, absolutely.
Definitely. So, Greg, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Apologies for my drooping eyes or the jet lag that's come in, but it was great for you to be able to jump on with me.
You look as bright and chipper and handsome as always. But thank you very much for having me on your podcast. It's been a great pleasure talking to you.
And it's been a pleasure to have you on board, and I wish you well in your continuing career. Thank you very much. Wow. That was just an incredible conversation with Greg. And thank you very much, Greg, for coming on the show. It was an absolute pleasure to have another fellow tater on the show. As we wrap up today's episode, I'm sitting here looking at my notes, and I want to highlight 3 major lessons that every single late blooming actor, or any actor really, listening right now needs to take into the audition room next time. First, your life is your script. Greg reminds us that we aren't starting late, we are starting experience. Whether your background is in chemical engineering, trade work, or corporate management, that unique human history is a direct asset. Casting directors aren't looking for textbook perfection. They want a distinct, lived-in human flavor. And as late bloomers, we have that. But if you're not a late bloomer, you get that from your training and learn to draw on your experience. And as you grow with every role, every scene, every monologue that you do, you build on that ability to draw on something. So just grab that and harness it. The second point is stop performing, start responding. Taking a page right out of Greg's work with the Greg apps and the audition technique, we throw out the pressure to give a massive over-rehearsed performance. You know, so many people I hear from, especially now doing self-tapes in your self-tape room, they do 10, 15, I've heard as high as 35 takes to get a take to send in. And you're only allowed to send in 1 or 2. So don't do that. Don't over-rehearse. Walk onto the self-tape or onto a set in the room if you're fortunate to get into the room and ground yourself. Focus entirely on the instinctual human response and deliver the scene. Get it done. Get out. And finally, find your micro gym. Don't wait around for an agent to hand you a professional job before you practice your craft. Use weekly character challenges, micro tapes, and simple home gear to keep your muscles warm. Experiment and stay match fit. And we've mentioned the audition technique, castability, stage milk. We auditioned so many communities where you can do this. Just find your micro gym and do it regularly and make it work. You don't need a formal drama degree or an expensive studio set up to make an impact. If you've got them, that's great. It's another tool in your toolbox, so to speak. You just need your unique ear, your intuition, and the courage to show up exactly who you are. A massive thank you to Greg for sharing his incredible journey with us today. It's so great to have a fellow tater on. That's why it's nice. That's why my podcast is about reaching out to people that have crossed my paths. And Greg's part of a community that I love and treasure, and that makes me such a better actor. And we talked about that. So that's why you need to find out your community. We talk about them all the time on my show. Reach out to me if you want links or help in deciding which one you want. But it's community. It's about having a place to practice and play all the time. If today's episode gives you the push you needed to trust your path, then hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and share this with a fellow actor who's carving out their own timeline. I'll leave all the links for Greg in the show notes. If you want to check him out, that would be appreciated. I'm sure he would. I hope you really got something out of it. So guys, until next time, keep booking, keep playing, and trust your timing. Guys, I'll see you on set. Cheers.